What's leadership? Who is a leader? What does it take to find success as a leader? These questions and more are explored throughout the episodes on supporting leaders. Listeners get to hear from a diverse group of experts within a wide range of industry. Come along with us on the road to growth and learning. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Hartman. Well, welcome to the second season of Supporting Leaders. And I can't think of a better person to kick off season 2 than Anese Cavanaugh. And so I was just sharing with Anese a little bit that when I was a principal, I picked up her book. I'm pretty sure I heard Dana Schoen at SAI talk about it, but her book, Contagious Culture. And Anese, I didn't tell you this part, but you open the book. Well, okay, first of all, it's called Contagious Culture. It's got, like little word bubbles. And I'm thinking our culture could use some improvement. And I'm going to read this book so I can figure out what do I need to tell my people that they need to do differently? I can't wait to find out. And so, I think it's the very first page, the very first paragraph, even I have it underlined. You are to celebrate for the success of your culture or to blame for its failure. Yes. And so I'm like, what? I wasn't expecting to read a book about me and the work I needed to do. And then I went to, Dana put on a workshop about it, and it was like one of the most impactful things for my leadership. It completely transformed my leadership. And so, Anese, I just appreciate you so much. And I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for reading it and for doing the work that you do, and for also being willing to pick up a book, to have the thought of okay, great, I'm going to fix everyone around me. And then you pick it up and you see that first paragraph and you keep reading.
Right.
Right. Like that's, to me, that's a really big deal. To me, one of the biggest things about leadership is our willingness to look at something and go, oh, okay, wait, it's not all out there. It's actually happening in here. And then to be willing to keep reading through and doing the work around a principle like that. So thank you. And thank you for having me for your first second season, your first series of your second. Anyway, okay, no math.
Well, the bar I know is going to be set really high. So obviously, Anese, people know, now that if they're just listening and learning about you for the first time, that you're an author. But tell us a little bit about your background and who you are.
Sure. So I actually started in many years ago. My background was actually in kinesiology and working with athletes and performance. I worked in corporate health and productivity. I worked in healthcare. Like a really nice smorgasbord of building in my career. And long story short, when I was about almost 20 years ago, I started to really look at what was it that I felt was the most important in terms of helping people develop in their performance and how they felt, and also how they impacted other human beings. And so I pulled together all the things that I'd seen work the best. So I pulled my kinesiology and working with the body. I pulled mindset work. I pulled leadership work. I pulled healthcare, all these different pieces, Lisa. And I literally, Contagious Culture's got the Post-its on the front. I literally designed my ideal job sitting in the front seat of my Dodge Durango when my son was almost a year old, I think, and wrote out all the things that I thought were the most important that I would want to actually be doing with my life now, the job. I actually created a job description on these Post-its, and I'd be like, okay, working with performance, Post-it, working with self-care, Post-it, this is all these different pieces. So that when I was done and Jake was still sleeping, when I was done, I had this gorgeous array of all these awesome key job responsibilities I would have. And I created this thing, but there was nobody that was going to give me that job. So I basically created a company out of it. So that's kind of where that started and where I went out on my own. And then what happened was I started attracting a lot of business leaders who wanted to do leadership development and really wanted to work with their team and increase their collaboration and everything. And I tried to just focus on leadership and coaching. But what I found was that if we weren't doing the things around that we talk about in the book, intentions, energy, presence, self-care, how we're showing up, how we're really owning our leadership, if they weren't doing that and they weren't working on themselves first, it didn't matter how awesome the initiative was that they started in their company, it was leaving a ton of opportunity on the table. And in some cases, it was actually creating more harm than good. And more harm than good, because let's just say we go in and we do a great training, but then everyone that goes in that training is still exhausted, burning out, not taking care of themselves, and not showing up well. They're still blaming and pointing out at the rest. Like, if that's what's happening, then those people come out of the training, they've got all these awesome tools, but they're still making people feel horrible and they're still exhausted. So it wouldn't work. So that's kind of how the IEP methodology started, was I started to really look at what are the things I think are the most important. Let's put that underneath any training. And we had a method. So
wow. Well, so there's so much in there, because I just, even the, like, putting out in front of you, like, what is your ideal job, and making that come to fruition by, speaking over it and having it in front of you. But I want to move into, you talked about the IEP method, and that's really about your leadership presence. If you're an educator, you hear IEP and you think individual education plan. So tell us, what is IEP, and what does that mean?
Oh, thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah, that's ironically, I did not realize when I named this work, and I named it IEP method, it was because of, intentional energetic presence. It's, so intentional energetic presence is literally what it sounds like. It's being intentional about the energetic presence we bring to anything that we do and the experience that we create, so whether I am teaching, I'm in this conversation with you, I'm talking to my 16-year-old, I am, doing the dishes, I'm preparing my taxes. It's what is the energy that I'm bringing to this experience? And then what experience am I creating through that? So if I'm bringing really contracted energy and I'm not present and I'm not taking care of myself, I'm probably going to show up more contracted and like, ugh, and I'm not going to have a great experience. I'm also not going to create a great experience for people around me. So if I put a little bit of intention around that, all of a sudden, my IEP is what I call it. My IEP starts to shape up in a different way, and I can completely change the experience. When I named it, I actually did not realize, I had not even put it together about IEP and education, and this kind of IEP. And I was actually putting a lot of educators through my workshops, and nobody said anything to me. And then one day I remember somebody came up to me, it was like the third or fourth time I'd run it. And they said, it's weird, like, that IEP stands for something totally different in education. And I went, oh my gosh, of course. And so then I thought, do I need to rename it? And they were like, no, don't rename it. We really need it like this. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, IEP, your intentions, your energy, and your presence.
Yeah, but it fits, because it literally really is like creating your individual plan for yourself by looking at it. And so, like, when I read the book and, learned about that, it was like mind blow, like, that, like, well, my, what I eat and how I take care of myself and how I feel inside impacts me. But I really hadn't thought about, like, how does that affect other people? So, like, share a little bit more of, like, for somebody who might say, like, that doesn't really matter to other people. Like, how does that matter to other people? Like, what I do and how I take care of myself. Like, what is it about that?
Oh, so good. I love it that you're asking that question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question that way. I love that question, because I think anybody listens to right now. So when I think about the IEP work, I look at it in two ways. It's how are we showing up for ourselves, and how are we showing up for each other, for other people? And what I believe is, if we're not showing up for ourselves first, then it's really hard. For sure, we can't show up our best for everybody else. And it's really hard to sustain showing up for people, even not optimally, so it's not. So if you think about, like, when we go on an airplane ride and the pilot says, if the plane starts to crash and the oxygen comes out, put your oxygen mask on first before you even put it on your child. And it's like, wait, what? My child? Like, of course I would put it on my child. Well, no, because if I'm passed out or worse, I can't actually support my child or the people around me. So to me, it's the same idea. It's like, if I'm taking care of myself, if I'm clear about my intention, if I'm doing the things I need to do to manage my energy and, my self-care and the way I'm thinking, the way I'm talking about things and to myself, if I'm doing that, that has me bring a stronger energetic presence. And I even think about it as like an energetic field that then I can be more intentional with how I'm interacting with the people around me. So where that matters to other people is, it's like, if I'm exhausted and I'm not present, I am much more likely to make the people around me probably feel exhausted, not present too, because it's contagious. And I'm not going to be very compelling as a leader, and I'm more likely to have negative impact on them. And I see this every single day. I see, somebody who's moving really fast and they're really, really tired, and I even have people say to me like, well, I'll sleep when I'm dead. It's like they're moving so quickly. And the impact of that is that the people around them, the people that they're leading, their family, they're not feeling that person's presence. They're actually probably getting a lot of negative energy from them. And more often than not, that leader, even though they may not have meant it, is having unintended negative impact because they're less patient. They're not present. Like, we need to have people present with us. It's a core need. Like, we know when somebody's not present, it actually increases our cortisol level, which is a stress hormone. So if you and I are together and we're hanging out here, and I write about this in Contagious You, which is the next book, because after Contagious Culture, people were like, yeah, but. So, okay, well, Contagious You, we're going to go even deeper. So Contagious You, I talk about the science of this. And when we're with somebody, and if I'm pretending to be present, but you can sense it, like, on some level, I'm not with you. Anybody listening to this knows what that feels like. Your stress hormone starts to kind of elevate. Your cortisol starts to go up. So it actually is not only breaking trust and credibility, but it actually is physiologically taxing on the person you're with. And so, there's a physiological reason why it's important, but then just think about the emotional reason of it. It's like, we're creating impact with our presence all the time. And it's either positive and it's making people feel seen and cared about and more committed and more inspired and more present, or it's moving really fast and it's making people feel not important, which as we all know, like, that doesn't work. So
you write about in the book that exact line about the I'll sleep when I'm dead. And I think, like, as a younger leader, I felt that, like, go, and like took like pride in, like, if I woke up in the middle of the night, I'd check my email, I'd send an email and response, because it was like, oh, look at me, look at how much I care about and think about my families and my staff. And I'll never forget, I had a teacher, and she's the sweetest, but she, I think I just had a baby and I was up and I sent an email, and the next day she brings me a coffee, puts it on my desk, and she had a note on it. And she said, you emailed me at 4 a.m. I think you're going to need this today. And it was so nice, but it was also like, Lisa, wake up. Like, you have to stop doing this. Is not like, that was not like, it was sweet, but it was also like, this is not a badge of honor, because your staff sees what you're doing, and I do not want them to do it. And then, like, reading that book, I was like, yep, that confirms it for me, that, like, me doing that and my energy around that was going to negatively impact other people, not just me.
For sure. And it's so contagious, so it's like, busy begets more busy. So I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but, like, I'll start talking, if I start talking about how busy I am and how hard things are and this, that, the other thing, the people around me, they'll start to match that conversation. So then now there's more business, and it almost becomes like a competition for busy. Busy is the new fine, it's like, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. Well, how are you? Oh, I'm so busy. And, I talk about this in the book, and I go even deeper in the other one too, because the language that we use has a big impact. So if you think about what it feels like to say things like, well, I'm so busy, or it's hard, or I have to, or, like, I'm so worried, like, all of those words, those create more energetic contraction. They're not necessarily very life-giving and energizing words to use. And they also don't feel great to the person who's on the other side receiving them. Because if I say to you, like, oh, Lisa, I'm so worried about this thing, my guess is if you're my team member, you are probably not, like, super inspired by that. But if I change my language and I go, Lisa, I'm aware of this, let's talk about it. Worry versus aware, completely different energetic impact. Instead of saying, I'm going to try to do this, it's like, I will do it. I hope this happens versus I intend this to happen. I'm so busy versus I'm really on purpose and very, I for a long time I used richly scheduled, because
Yeah.
richly scheduled was a word that helped me like expand my field versus contract it. So it's worth really paying attention. This comes back to your original question of how is the way that we're talking and the way we're taking care of ourselves and our relationships with our sleep and busy and all that stuff, how does that impact us personally? But then take it a step further, and how is it affecting the people around me? And I think one of my favorite things of everything in this work is I will notice how quickly I can shift a dynamic. If I am noticing that, I'm teaching a class or I'm working with a client or I'm talking to my kid, and I'm noticing that I'm not feeling good in the conversation and I'm not getting the response I want, like they're kind of checked out or their arms are crossed or whatever's happening, I will notice that my first go-to now is to go, okay, hold on, what's happening here? Am I actually present? There's a really good chance I'm not totally present if I'm noticing that. The minute I get myself present, take a nice deep breath, and then check in with, okay, how am I showing up? And what is the experience what's the energy I'm projecting? If I can notice that and then intentionally start to shift it, 9 times out of 10, the person who I'm with will start to shift their energy as well. They'll start to come in, because if I can shift from a state of, let's just say, judgment, I'm in a feedback conversation, I'm feeling really judgmental, that is really contracted energy. If I can shift that judgment into curiosity or even gratitude.
Yes.
So you and I are talking and I've got feedback for you, right? I'm like, okay, well, Lisa, and you did this and and even if I give you the most perfect feedback, I'm like, oh, here's the most gorgeous feedback of your life. But it is laced with me being exhausted and blamey and judgmental of you. You are not going to receive that feedback. You're going to get that feedback and you're going to go, that might've been the best feedback I received, but man, she didn't make me feel really great. I don't trust her. She wasn't present with me. And you may or may not apply it, and you're definitely not walking away feeling great. However, if I can catch myself and go, all right, hold on a second. I got this feedback for Lisa. I'm coming from the intention of care and really wanting to serve her growth and serve her as a human being. And I'm curious, like, why this keeps happening. And I really want to contribute and be of service. If I come and I'm going to be really present with her, if I'm coming to you and I'm clear on my intention, I check my energy. So I'm clean in my energy. I've taken care of myself. I'm not sitting here because I have to use the bathroom. Like so many people don't use, like, it's a little thing on the energy part, but so many people, like, they hold it all day long. Well, you guys, you're not present if you have to pee the whole time you're in a conversation with somebody, like it's a silly thing, but it's true. And if I check my presence, that conversation, that feedback is going to be so much better. And the feedback might be the exact same beautiful feedback. But the way I show up and the way I'm taking care of myself and my intentions for you is going to be the difference between you taking that feedback and going, whatever, and you taking that feedback and going, man, I feel so seen and cared about. And I'm totally inspired to do this.
Oh,
That's
I feel like
the only difference.
Like, talk to you for hours because there's so many things there's so many places I want to go, like just with that. But here's where I'll take it is, talking to school leaders the last couple of days and talking about going into this upcoming school year. And, most years, people will be like, oh, I'm so excited for another year, and right now, some of the feedback that you hear is like, yeah, like I'm excited. And I was talking to someone today and I think she nailed it. She was like, I am excited. I'm excited about the work I get to do, but I'm still so tired from last year. And I have a hypothesis that people who, have integrated, some of the practices that you have put together, the model that you put together, that they've been able to be a little bit more resilient through the process of last year. I'm curious if you've seen that. And how has some of this helped people get through such difficult times?
Yeah, it's and education, I have a special place in my heart for education. I always have, I always will. Like what all of you manage and the impact that you're having and how much you guys all care about what you're doing. Like to me, like it brings tears to my eyes because I just think about what you're all up to out there and how tricky that is from all the different angles with the students and parents and like there's just so much. So what I would say to that is that the answer is yes, for sure. People who are applying this work and are using this and really creating the space in their life to do it. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time. A lot of times people say, well, I don't have time to do this. Like, I don't have time to do my IEP. My feeling is, as a leader, you don't have time not to do it. Because what I notice is that when people do this and they even spend 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of the day, getting conscious and present to what they need, to what their intentions are and how they're going to take care of themselves, those 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of your day can change the entire tone of your day. And so, yes, when they're applying this, it does. I can also tell you that last year for me, the last year, 2020, was hands down the most difficult of my own personal life. Like, I was really challenged in the pandemic. Like, I felt like the universe was like, really, IEP, do you mean it? Because let's see how it goes. Because when the pandemic hit, we had 80% of our engagements got canceled. Like, there was so much, so there was stuff happening that was the pandemic. There was the grief of the pandemic, just that alone. There was my kids, and then them with their school situation. There was a lot of things that were happening. And I remember going, oh my gosh, like, how do I bounce out of this one really authentically? Because there's a way that you can bounce and be resilient. Like, you're talking about people going back to the next school year. I love it that woman said to you, I'm really tired from last year. Because to me, recovery and resiliency starts with authenticity. So, there's a way that we can bounce and move through something and be resilient, quote, and, totally air quotes here. And we're doing it by doing a complete spiritual bypass, which is like, okay, let's go. Time to do the next school year. Bubble up. Let's go. We're going to get our IEP on, and we're going to hold our space, and we're going to have a great attitude, and we're going to be positive, and like all that stuff, which I think is totally garbage if that's not where you're at. So to me, resiliency actually starts with authenticity and really owning, like, here's where I'm at. I'm really tired. I'm having a hard time, and giving yourself the self-care and the nourishment to take a minute, like, and to kind of catch your breath. And then my experience of this and what I see with clients and students and everything is that you catch your breath, and now you can actually see what's here. And then there's another process of, like, really looking through, okay, what's happened? And actually, Lisa, I created a resiliency model this last year. I see 7 phases of resiliency, and we can get that to you guys, so you guys can look at that and kind of see where you're at in it. But there's 7 phases of resiliency. And part of it is, where am I at? What have I gone through? What did I lose? What did I gain? What did I learn? Who did I become? Because none of that is taking extra time. It's just more of awareness and noticing where you put your attention. So I know it's a very long answer to what you just asked, but basically it's like, yes, the people that spend the time doing this work, they create more space in their life. And it doesn't mean that chaos and the hard stuff and exhaustion goes away. It means that we get better at dealing with it and seeing what do we need to do to take care of ourselves. And then also, I know for me, and I'll only speak for myself, but for me, I noticed that a lot of things got really clear to me this last year of, like, what is really important to me? What is noise? Even in the work that I'm doing, what is the noise where I actually don't need to be doing that anymore? Where can I be even more intentional in that? And none of that would have been possible if I wasn't taking care of myself and doing the things that we're talking about. So I can speak for myself privately, but I can also speak for myself from even, whether it's education or I do a lot of work with organizations. If you are willing to take the time to get present with yourself and to tell yourself the truth about what is happening, which may be, it is horrible right now, or I'm like doing amazing and I feel bad because I'm doing so great. Like, if you're willing to take the time to tell yourself the truth and to breathe into that, and then to get really clear about what your intention is and how you're going to take care of yourself, and then you stay present, you will move through this next year in a totally different way. But we have to take care of ourselves first. There's no way for educators. And I know a lot of people listen to your show are educators. It's like, like educators, leaders, human beings who want to have more impact. There is no way to move through life and have the impact on the people that you love and lead if you are not taking care of yourself, not sustainably, and not as like pleasurably either. Because that's another important piece. It's like, it's not just about sustaining ourselves. Like, I really want people to have as much pleasure in their lives as possible, because I think pleasure and impact go together. Like, the more we take care of ourselves, the more we can give to other people. So they go together. I'm sorry, I feel like that was a very, very, very 18-part answer to your question.
Oh, but incredible. I think there's so much people can take from that. And at the start of that, when you were talking about the authenticity of your feelings, like I totally got goosebumps when you talked about that, because I'm just thinking about how, I think last year for educators was so much was different and it was so challenging. And I think that there might be like people who might feel like, okay, let's go on with this year. It's going to be different. Like we, in certain places, maybe we don't have to wear masks this year. And so, all right, let's just move on. Let's move on and kind of brush last year under the rug. But like listening to you talk, it's like, let's take a moment. Let's take a moment and think about this. And so, that resiliency, that toolkit that you have sounds amazing if people could get their hands on that. So tell us a little bit, Anese, about, you've alluded to it a little bit, but some of the things you're working on now, and then you also are going to share something really exciting about some tools that educators and other people could access.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we've got a couple things, and I don't know when will this come out? I didn't even think to ask.
About a week.
Generally speaking. About a week? Oh, perfect. Okay, wonderful. So we're working on something really special to do at the end of this month. I think the date we're looking at is August 27th. So I'll start talking about this on social media, maybe tomorrow even. I don't know. We'll see. I've got some work to do. I've got some homework to do before we announce it. But we're working on something to help people go into the fall in a reset. So we're going to do a little reset thing. So there's a couple things. One, there's a resiliency model that if people go and they just go to iep.io, they will download what is called the IEP sheet, which will get them into our system. And when you go in that and you put your information, there's a thing that says like, what is your profession, or what is it that you do? If you mark down you're an educator, it's going to put you on a special list, because we've got some things that we want to do for education before the school year starts to help you guys reset, reboot, and like just get your IEP on in the way that we're talking about it. So just if you're listening to this at any time, whether this is now as current or even in the future, when you get on that, you're going to get onto a special educator list. So we're doing different things for educators. The other piece is that we're starting a really cool membership / subscription this fall that will have special rates for educators and healthcare and the people who really have been, so many people have been front lines with the pandemic and everything, but just we're going to have some special things for people where they can participate in that and get this work in light bites at a really like lower than normal tuition and everything. So there's a lot of stuff. And then if you get onto iep.io, that will put you directly in contact with me, and then we can let you know when stuff is coming out and special codes and all that good stuff. But my team and I are really, really grateful for you. As a mom, I'm a mom. I have a 20-year-old and I have a 16-year-old. And as a mom, I am so grateful for as a mom and a human being and just a human being, I'm just very grateful. So we're doing as much as we can to try and support what you're all doing.
Well, I'm sure I'm not the only educator who would say to you that it's nice to hear that kind of appreciation. And we appreciate you, providing back to us. And I think those tools are going to be amazing. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And so, I'd also say too, like what some of the things that you and I talked about during this episode really just brushed the very surface of contagious culture. And, Anese referred to bubble up, and like the bubble up thing was huge for me too. You'll learn about responsible venture partners. So go get the book. It's totally worth it. And then tell us a little bit more. What's the other book?
Oh yeah. The other book is, here, let me pull it over. The other book is Contagious You. And this one, actually, a lot of this was inspired from some of the groups I did work with in education. So there were a couple, for a while, before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of keynotes. And so I would go and I would speak to different groups, as you and I were talking about earlier. But the Contagious You came out because what I noticed was with contagious culture, you pick up that book and you pick it up because you go, oh, great, it's about the culture. What am I going to do to fix my culture? And you pick it up and then you go, just to your point earlier, oh, the culture is actually me. So what I noticed about contagious culture was that was the big surprise. People would go like, oh my gosh, I thought that this was going to be about fixing my culture and my business, but actually it starts with me. And wow, now I have freedom because you have control over you. I have control over me. If my culture is dependent on everybody around me, if my life experience is dependent on everybody around me, I'm in some trouble because I might be waiting a really, really long time to have the kind of culture and experience I want to have. But if it's dependent on me and I ultimately emanate the culture I want to be a part of or not, and I can learn how to shift my experience, now I've got like a ton of power in my life. So that was contagious culture. But I noticed, Lisa, that I still had a lot of people that would come up to me, and there was 3 different types. One would come up to me after a talk and they'd go, oh my gosh, I love contagious culture. Thank you so much. Okay, now what do I do about this? And what do I do about this? And how do I make this even more? So I was like, okay, we need to extend the work to help people on an even more personal level get better at this content. And then there was the other one that was common as well, would go, yeah, culture, got it. Just give me the culture checklist. They'd still say, I want the culture checklist. They were still not getting it. And they were still thinking that culture was outside of themselves. And what I would notice is that 9 times out of 10, when someone would say that to me and they'd walk away, the person that was standing right next to them would go, of all the people in our organization, that's the guy or the gal that really needs to get that they're the culture, because they're the one that we keep quitting. So I went, all right, I'm going to write this next book, which is going to help people who are already like in it get better at it. People don't believe in it, or still don't see themselves in it. I'm going to help them see it in a different way. And then the third one was really looking at the people that were struggling with relationships, that were really believing in the IEP work, but they had, and I always call the nemesis in all my books is always G or George or Georgette, because at that point I had never met a George or Georgette. So it was an easy pick on person. And so how do you work better with what we call the lowest vibration in the room, or the person who just keeps exhausting you? And so that was why I wrote it. It's 100 extra pages. It's way more intense. But if you do the work in it, it's basically like an executive coach in a book. So that one's available now too. That one came out right before the pandemic, literally right before the pandemic. And it was very interesting to have a book called Contagious Culture and then a book called Contagious You and then Contagious COVID come out. Yeah. So that was an interesting combination of things happening in my life at that time.
Right. Well, I am putting that in my Amazon cart as soon as we are off the podcast. So Anese, I always end the show with one final question. And the question is, what do you know for sure about leadership?
Okay, I got to do a three part. One, that the most important relationship you're ever going to have is the relationship you have with yourself first. The more healthy that is, the more healthy your leadership is going to be. 2, that self-care is a leadership skill. And 3, that the antidote to busyness or getting things right or looking good or anything is always being in service of. So take care of yourself, be in service of, and really build your relationship with yourself. Those 3 things, if you do those 3 things, everything else outside of leadership becomes 100 times easier and more powerful, in my opinion.
That's good.
What about you?
Well, I was going to say, it's almost like I let you know that question like way in advance. And I told you right when we started, I was going to ask that, but that was such a thoughtful response, like you just had that in your back pocket. For me, I think part of this journey too of having people on the show is this exploration of leadership. And I'm really curious about what kind of themes come out from, interviewing different people who think about leadership in different ways. And so, for me, I think the only thing I think I know for sure, is that, well, leadership is hard. It is not easy. And that leadership is continuous improvement. Well, I should say effective leadership is continuous growth.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a reason why not everybody wants to lead. I mean, it's really true. It can be really, really challenging, and it's not, there's so many hard decisions, and like, there's a lot there in what you just said, but what it makes me think of is like, I think that leading, building off of that, is one of the most special opportunities and honors that we get as human beings. And if we're willing to do the work and step into that, and to really lean into the places that feel a little bit more challenging or edgy or hard, or however you want to speak to them, it's like, if we're willing to lean into that in service of another human being, something that we care about, if we're willing to lean in service of, then it becomes a lot less hard. That's been what I've noticed about leadership. So it's like, it comes back to that self-care piece and that service piece, and then really choosing to lead and to see it as an honor versus this huge, horrible, hard obligation.
Yes.
Which is easy to start going into.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, I mean, it has been a complete honor to have you on the show, Anese. There's so much in this episode that I know people will get so much out of this. And so I'm excited to share you with our listeners. I hope they download some of the resources. I hope that they, explore some of your work, because it's so impactful, and it not just impacts your own leadership, but those around you. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Supporting Leaders podcast. For more on supporting leaders, go to www.supportingleaders.org. Here you'll find links to the YouTube versions of our interviews and links to the podcast. You'll also find articles on leadership. To join in on the conversation, find the Supporting Leaders group on Facebook, and find us on Instagram at Supporting Leaders.